This
Okay.
conference will now be
Ooh,
recorded.
what is
All
it?
right. Let me know when you want me to start.
Just a moment. I clicked on something that
We're looking at ads.
yeah. Well, I tried to do the record and it slipped down to the corner and got ads.
Uh-oh.
Okay,
You
go
ready?
ahead.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, for all of you that don't know me, my name is Gayle Klein, and I'm hoping you can hear me. I'm in charge of the programs for this year, and so first up for January, I'd like to introduce Kirsi Dahl. We met when she joined the club down here. We have a genealogy club in Arizona, and she's done a few presentations for our club as well. She also leads our story writing group for the club, and she's just overall a great person. I'll tell you a little bit about her. She is a passionate genealogist and storyteller, and she's been doing genealogy for more than half of her life. That's a long time. That might be longer than mine. I haven't done it half my life. Her natural curiosity and keen insights have been guiding forces throughout her life and her marketing career, where she honed her skills in creating unforgettable experiences for audience through big brand campaigns. So having that marketing background, I can tell you from reading her writing, has truly helped. It was the realization of the profound impact of storytelling that prompted Kirsi to transition from dates and names to writing family history narratives in her genealogy efforts. And she does have a blog, Stories from the Tree, and I'll be putting in a link with her handout as well as the link to her blog podcast so you can enjoy that too afterwards. So anyway, Kirsi, go ahead and just take it away, and I'll try to turn myself off here.
I think you're still.
I'm doing it. Hold on.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Kirsi, this is Margie. I can hear you, but I think you're in presentation mode on your slideshow. I don't think you're in the right mode yet.
Okay,
We
thank you.
can hear you.
Great. Okay, how about now?
There we go.
Yeah. Still.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Gayle, for the beautiful introduction. I appreciate that. She likes me. She really likes me. As Gayle said, I've been doing genealogy research for a long time, and I really just love, probably like many of you, the hunt and the excitement of finding the nuggets of truth within all the family stories. A few years ago, I heard myself say this out loud, and I bet some of you have said this too. I don't know what's going to become of all the genealogy information I've discovered once I die. At the time, I was sort of laughing about the solo nature of genealogy research and the fact that my kids didn't seem very interested. But as I really thought about that statement, I realized that I've got way too much time invested into this hobby to have all that I've learned die with me. So that's when I realized that for me, genealogy is not just about the names and dates, it's about understanding the stories of our ancestors. So I started writing the stories. And my goal has been to convert my collection of facts into memorable family history narratives. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, a memorable way to share what we've learned as genealogists, how to get started, and how AI can help. I've always been a person to ask a lot of questions, especially why. I did this as a child, and much to my parents' dismay. I did this in my career in marketing, as Gail said, and in consumer research. And I still do it today. And one thing that I learned from doing consumer research is that you have to ask why 5 times to get to the truest insight. For example, let's imagine a conversation between you and me. If I said, "Why are you here today?" you might say, "To learn more about genealogy." And as a true researcher, I would say, "Why?" And you might say, "Because I love it." And I would say, "Why?" "Because I love learning about my family's history." And the fourth why? Because I've heard details over the years and I want to find out if they're true. And finally, why? Because I want my family to know what our ancestors' lives were like. Aha! There it is, the deeper reason why most of us are doing what we're doing. I think for most of us, the ultimate goal of doing the genealogy work is to leave behind a legacy, to make sure that those who come after us know about those who came before us. And if you Google how to leave a family legacy, you will see that by far, experts say write down the stories, traditions, recipes. Just get them down on paper. And the reason experts say storytelling is an important part of leaving a legacy is because it's much more engaging and memorable than fact sharing. 22 times more memorable, in fact. And I just think this is so important. Most of our family members aren't genealogists. They are not as passionate as we are about census records and city directories. When we share our discoveries, our family may smile and nod approvingly, but they're not going to remember. But if we convert those facts into a narrative format, we can engage our families, perhaps even more than we thought possible. And there are so many studies that prove the memorability of stories versus facts. According to one study by a Stanford professor, 63% of people were able to remember stories, while only 5% could remember a single statistic. So there's no denying that there are real fact-based reasons why sharing information about our ancestors in the form of a story, whether that's a written memory, a tradition, a recipe, or a crafted story, instead of just presenting a collection of facts, it's going to be much more memorable, and it's a critical part of leaving behind a legacy for your family. But the idea of writing can be very intimidating. There are valid fears. Let me share the four most common fears of beginning to write a story. And the good news is there is some really cool advice from experts on how to overcome those fears. Have I done enough research? Do you say things like, I don't know exactly where or when my ancestor was born, or what her parents' names may have been, or I don't know which war he served in, or I don't know how or where she died. I don't know this or I don't know that. The answer to the question, have you done enough research, is no. You never will have done enough research no matter how much you think you know about an ancestor. But that's okay. You don't have to write a complete end-to-end chronological story. You're not writing a history book. You can write about a singular experience like a courtship or a marriage or an immigration journey. There are so many options. In fact, you'll be more likely to finish a story if you make your goal much smaller and more attainable. And one thing about writing a story that I've discovered is that you have to actually do the process of writing the story to learn the most about your ancestor. And a lot of other folks I know that do writing, such as Gayle, agree with me. And in terms of not having enough research, I'll just throw in this little thought. I once did a story in the form of a movie about the information I didn't know about an ancestor and put it out there to my cousins and was able to gather a bunch of information that way. So there's lots of options to do when you don't have all the information. What if people don't like what you've written? Of course, you're going to want to be sensitive about some details, but maybe they're not ready for sharing if they're private. But you still need to do the work of getting them down before they're lost to time. But if you do share something and you get negative feedback, so what? I think we're a little old to be worrying about what other people think. In most cases, it's highly unlikely that your story won't be appreciated by your family. In fact, in my experience, it's much more likely that when you share, they share. And it'll trigger memories for you, and they'll start flooding in, and you'll have all kinds of new clues and information to work with and new stories to consider. What if my facts aren't right? If your facts aren't right, how will you know? Well, someone who has read your story will inform you, no doubt, but that's good news, right? Let me ask you this. Have you ever used an eraser? Do you know what a delete key on a keyboard can do? Of course, I say that tongue in cheek, but just as a reminder, we're not carving in stone. If you learn a new fact or something is incorrect with your details, you can change it. The last big, and perhaps maybe the biggest fear is, who am I to write a story? You may say to yourself, I don't have special training, or I'm not an author, or my personal favorite, English was my worst subject in school. First of all, there's nothing in the definition of story that says they have to be Nobel Prize quality novels. They can simply be snippets or vignettes of moments or singular events. So who are you to write a story? Well, who will preserve the memories and the research if you don't do it? Who knows the research better than you? I had all of these fears, and I have a background in communications, and I was an English major in college, but I was able to get past them, and I think you can too. Okay, so you know why you should start writing the stories about your family, because it's 22 times more memorable. Yes, there's going to be a quiz. And you know how to overcome the most common fears about starting. Now you just need to start. And you probably don't want to start with the multi-volume history of your family dating back to the Mayflower. Do something smaller. I'm going to share a few unexpected examples of easier ways to start writing the stories of your ancestors. Write about an artifact that used to belong to one of your ancestors. We actually did this yesterday in our writing group and had, within 15 minutes, everybody in the group had something written down on paper about an artifact that they either had in their possession from an ancestor or one that they remembered. It's a great experience, and I would say easier and much less intimidating than writing about an ancestor. I wrote about a half a page about my great-grandmother's pearl and sapphire brooch. This pin embodies what I remember about my great-grandmother. It's very ladylike, proper, and it's just so pretty with the faux pearls and the sapphires. The detail in the silver leaf design is gorgeous. I'm not sure what's going to happen to this pin after I'm gone, which is why I took the time to photograph it and attempt to learn more about the piece itself. Basically, I wrote about a pin that I know very little about. The best case scenario is that maybe now that the story is out there in the world on my blog, someone will see it and they might know something more about this pin, or maybe a distant cousin that I don't even know about has a picture of my great-grandmother wearing the pin. That's the best case. The worst case, a future family member knows a little bit more about the pin, including my personal appreciation for it, than if it had just been passed down to them without explanation. That's a pretty good worst case scenario. Here's another story about an artifact. I wrote it about my great-grandfather's derby hat. I don't even have this hat in my possession. Someone in the family had found it tucked away in their closet and had it photographed from a whole bunch of different angles. And knowing my love of genealogy and storytelling, she sent it to me. Here's what I knew at the time the picture was taken. In 1960, my great-grandfather had carefully retired this derby hat that he had owned. When he boxed it up at the time, he made note that it was at least 50 years old. This was exciting for me because it meant that this hat was on his head when he came to America. And I could just picture him coming in to the New York Harbor, seeing the Statue of Liberty, and just being impressed and awestruck with the thought of being in America. With some research of the name of the hat manufacturer, I was able to determine that he actually had purchased it from a haberdashery in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it wasn't as old as he had stated. But this was a new mystery to me because my great-grandfather was a poor immigrant from southern Italy working on the railroad. He didn't have money for something so exquisite. Why would he spend what today would be over $100 for something like this? In my story, I speculated that he was proud of having come as far as he had at that time, immigrating to America at age 19 by himself, unable to read or write in any language, and unable to speak English. He made it all the way to Minnesota, secured a job, and was pleased with himself. And I think the hat was symbolic of that pride. And that's all there is to the little story about my great-grandfather's hat. Here's another easy idea to get started writing stories. Write about a hobby you picked up during the pandemic. I can't take credit for this idea. One of the members of our story writing group here in Arizona mentioned that he had started writing down some of the experiences he had during the COVID pandemic, including what the news at the time was reporting and all the uncertainty. I thought this was a great idea. I mean, imagine if we all had something like this from one of our ancestors during the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918. I'm still working on writing about my experience in the early days of the pandemic, but I did create a tiny little book on Shutterfly with a few words about the watercolor hobby I picked up while I was isolating during that first summer. I scanned in some of the paintings, and my words were about how it felt to be creative during such a time of uncertainty. And that's all there is to getting started. You could write about what you were thinking when you took a certain photo or when one was taken of you. I have this photo framed in my home. It's a really bad photo. It's dark. It's not well composed. It's even blurry in some spots. It was taken on New Year's Eve, 1999, the eve of a new millennium. It was late afternoon, as you can see from the photo. It was definitely past sunset photo time. The only reason I went outside was to avoid my little kids seeing me cry. I had been grieving the loss of my marriage for over a year, and I was struggling with feelings of being a failure. I needed to break away from my kids for a moment to gain my composure. So I feigned that I was going outside to take a photo, and I didn't want to lie about what I was doing, so I squatted down and hastily snapped this picture. At the time, I wasn't thinking about composition, nor had I thought about the impact of immortalizing this once-in-a-millennium moment. But when I saw the developed photo, I was awestruck because, yes, the photo is dark and dreary, but the sky is pink. And that changed everything for me. It was so hopeful. I owe my willingness to be open to new relationships to that pink sky. What was happening in my mind during that moment was transformative for me. And that is why I have this bad photo framed in my house. This story is on my blog and also folded and tucked behind the photo in the frame so that someday when I'm no longer here, whoever comes across it will know why I had it. Here's another example of documenting what you may have been thinking about when a photo was captured. This is a picture of me when I was about 6 years old. You can see that I'm wearing a sash that says finalist and I'm wearing a crown. Even though I have no memories associated with this event, I do know that I had participated in a Little Miss contest in my neighborhood. And recently I came across a series of pictures from that time, and I noticed that there is not one photo where I'm smiling. There's probably 20 pictures and I look like this in every single one. It's weird. The first thought that crossed my mind was, what type of assumption might a future genealogist make about who I was as a young girl based solely on these photos? Why did I look so unhappy? Was I being forced to participate? Maybe I was mad that I wasn't the queen. I don't know. Maybe I was just moody. When I asked my mom if she knew why I wasn't smiling, she said, "Oh, you just lost your 2 front teeth and you were self-conscious about it." Okay, so that's a pretty simple explanation of what's going on in this photo. Nothing bad was happening. Now, think about how many times you've seen a photo of an ancestor and made some dramatic conclusions about who they were based on their facial expressions. Don't let that happen to you. It has been ingrained in most of us to write the full name, date, and location on the back of photos, but in some cases, writing about what was happening in your mind at the time is equally important. Another idea is you could write about an occupation that an ancestor had. My great-grandfather was a molder in a foundry. I know this because every census from 1870 to 1920 has his occupation listed as such, and city directories for the years in between also confirm this fact. I didn't know exactly what a molder at this time in history would have done, so I researched it and then I wrote about it. At least half of what I wrote was about what molders in a foundry did, that they were considered highly skilled workers, and I also wrote about the types of things the foundry he worked at primarily produced. In reality, this story is more about molders in general than it is about my great-grandfather, but the context provides a fascinating peek into the life he must have led, working long hours in an extremely hot environment. It must have been super grueling. I had noticed on one of the censuses that he indicated he worked up to 90 hours a week. There are probably a lot of reasons why he would have worked so many hours in such a punishing environment. With an understanding of the other events happening in his life during those years, I can speculate that he was working so hard to escape the grief he felt at the loss of his wife during the birth of their 12th child. Those examples have been meant to illustrate that stories don't need to be epic, and in some cases they don't even need to be directly about an ancestor's life. But they don't have to be written either. Written word in the form of a blog or printed and put into a binder or even handwritten are probably the most common ways to document your stories and is a great and easy way to get started. After all, there are no technical skills needed to handwrite a story and only a few technical skills to type a story. But there are other ways too, and I'm going to share two examples. Imagine an audio recording of your ancestor's voice telling a story or recalling a memory, like this one of your very own Gayle's parents talking about how they met.
We met in 1947.
Seaside, Oregon. And she worked at Patty's Fountain, and I came in to get a milkshake or something. And I thought that she was cute. I went in the fountain where she worked with a friend, and the friend said that she was a nice girl, but she had a boyfriend.
Because I was going with someone at the time.
And I said, I'll take her home. I have a convertible.
He had a new yellow convertible. He was very shy too, so I kind of had to make all the moves.
She introduced me to her parents when they came in the restaurant, and her mother thought I didn't look trustworthy. But then her mother never saw anybody who did, so that didn't hurt me too much.
I think that is the cutest video or audio recording ever, and the sound effects added were amazing. I think it's precious. Did everybody hear that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So video is another option. You could simply use your phone to record a relative or yourself as they talk about their memories, or you could create a little movie like I did to tell the story of my great-grandparents.
The year was 1910, a time of horse-drawn carriages and bustling farm towns, where secrets swirled thicker than autumn leaves. Alice, not yet having reached her 20th birthday, knew what her parents expected of her now that she was of marrying age. Her grandparents had immigrated from Ireland and were among the first settlers in the county. In her parents' eyes, Alice would marry a Catholic Irishman and continue the family's legacy as successful farmers, alders, and businessmen in the same town on the same land. Robert, a 20-year-old of German descent, had eyes as blue as the Minnesota sky. The fields his father owned began as a Civil War land grant and had grown to nearly 600 acres. Robert had been clearing and farming the land with his father full-time for over 5 years, only resting on Sundays for attendance at the nearby Lutheran church, where the services were always said in German. As the oldest son, his parents held the belief that Robert would marry a German girl, bring little German babies into the world, and take over the running of the family farm. For the parents of both Alice and Robert, the idea that their children would mingle among people outside of their ethnicity, and worse, outside their faith, was inconceivable. If it had been, they probably would not have given permission to attend the barn dances the young adults in the community regularly held that were just a horse and buggy ride away. Robert, a year older than Alice, had been attending barn dances with his friends for quite a while and was a favorite among the young ladies, for he had a charming smile, eyes that twinkled in the lantern light, and well-honed dance skills. Alice's dance skills were impressive for a first-timer and caught Robert's attention. The two became favorite dance partners and looked forward to seeing each other every week. Their love grew stronger each time they met up and with each shared word. But the whispers of prejudice cast long shadows. Ancient feuds and clashing faiths made it impossible for the couple to openly court, for Robert knew that he'd never received the permission of Alice's father. The couple soon made a secret plan to get married, believing that once done, their families would accept the union. Alice's faith was strong, and Robert agreed that they would get married by a priest and raise their children Catholic. He obtained a marriage license at the Scott County Courthouse, and with it, and little else, the couple met at the station. With hearts pounding like runaway horses, they boarded the train, leaving behind everything they knew for a promise whispered under a harvest moon, a promise to be one, despite the world's disapproval. St. Paul, a city of new beginnings, held the key to their dreams. But the path to forever proved steeper than imagined. The church, bound by ancient rules forbidding interfaith marriages, slammed its doors on their union. Despair threatened to drown their hope. Thinking quickly, Robert brought them to the Minneapolis courthouse for an unceremonious union. With a simple band of a ring slid onto Alice's finger and a judge's pronouncement, they were husband and wife, bound not by God's blessing, but by the unyielding spirit of their love. Though nervous to return home and share the news with her family, even Alice was shocked by her parents' rejection. Robert's family also was reluctant to offer their blessing and congratulation, but perceptions and propriety needed to be maintained. Though their marriage was legal in the eyes of the state, Alice's family would never approve unless the holy sacrament of marriage was performed in a Catholic church by a Catholic priest, requiring paperwork that would need to be reviewed and approved by the Archbishop, 3 readings of the banns, and ultimately the patience of Job. While they waited, life unfolded, painted in the hues of seasons changing. The couple welcomed their first baby. Alice attended regular Mass at her childhood house of worship and had her son baptized there. Yet when the special dispensation finally came through nearly 2 years later, the couple made their vows before God at a different church with strangers as witnesses. The ceremony was even more unceremonious than what Alice had experienced at the courthouse years prior, but it met the needs of her mother and a reunion ensued. 10 years later, Alice and Robert grew tired of the farming life, and with their 3 school-aged children, moved to St. Paul, where Robert took a job as a streetcar operator. They soon welcomed a 4th child. Though busy with work, raising 4 children, as well as living through the Great Depression and 2 world wars, the couple found time to attend dances with their city friends, reliving their youth. It wasn't until nearly a decade after Robert died at age 79 that Alice, never having told any of her friends or even her own children, relayed the story of her 2 weddings to her granddaughter in hushed tones, who later shared it with me. A legacy passed down like a precious heirloom.
So, okay, I just had to take a breath there for a second. Whether audio, video, or good old-fashioned writing, don't let worrying about the format stop you from getting started. I just wanted to show you a bunch of different ways that you could get started with writing. What's important is that you just get started. When I write some of my stories, I use AI to help me. Maybe you've heard of some of the popular AI chatbots like ChatGPT and Google Gemini. Others are Perplexity. There's just tons of them now. I used Google Gemini to help write the script for that video, And I've also used it for things as complex as helping me understand what a woman in 1950 may have been thinking and feeling when she made a critical decision to leave her family. And I've used it for things as simple as suggesting story titles and summaries. Behind the scenes, you may know that AI is being used by our favorite genealogy sites every day. Like MyHeritage, Ancestry, and Family Search, they all use AI to identify records, provide hints, and do some transcriptions like it did for the 1950 census indexing. It's used with DNA analysis and matching. It's used with photo enhancements, colorizations, and dating photos. And most recently, Family Search's full text search experiment with unindexed records is 100% powered by AI and is a fantastic tool. If you haven't discovered that yet, you might want to check that out. It's vastly different, though, than a search engine like Google. It's not a tool to use to track down facts or answer specific questions. In fact, if you asked it to tell you about your great-grandfather, AI might give you a completely made-up answer about your ancestor that seems legitimate and maybe even tugs at you emotionally, making you want to believe what it's told you. But unless your ancestor was quite famous, the information you get is most likely false. I think that happened to Gayle. Didn't that happen to
one of us.
You have to challenge. That's the biggest thing about AI is you have to challenge what you get back, and you have to do your own research to validate. Because for now and the foreseeable future, AI does not change the fact that we all need to be doing our own research, corroborating information with other records, and just being good genealogists. So if AI is not good for genealogy-related research, what can it help us with? Here are 4 things that AI can be used for to help write the stories of our ancestors. We can leverage it to brainstorm story starter ideas. We can use it to help us imagine conversations between our ancestors. We can use AI to mine for insights among the documents we've already accumulated. And my personal favorite is to use it as a writing professor. Essentially ask it to evaluate the writing that you've already done. I've used AI for all of these things, and what I've learned is that you have to have a good prompt to get the best result, and you need to recognize that you're having a conversation with AI. Here's an example of a good prompt when you need help brainstorming ideas. I'm working on a family history narrative, and I'd like some ideas to make the introduction more engaging. The story begins with my grandmother's journey during the Great Depression. Can you suggest ways to capture the reader's attention and set the tone for the narrative? Within 1 or 2 seconds, it came back with 3 ways to write an engaging introduction. I could paint a vivid scene, personalize the experience, or create suspense or intrigue. For each of these suggestions, it also provided some specific language examples. For example, with the vivid scene, in the dusty backdrop of the 1930s, where hope struggled to survive, my grandmother's journey unfolded. You'll find that AI, especially ChatGPT, is very dramatic in its word choices. And there's ways to get around that I'll mention here. You can personalize the experience. The specific language example: amidst the economic turmoil, my grandmother, a resilient soul, faced a defining moment that would shape the course of our family's history. Or maybe you want to create suspense. Little did she know, hidden in the shadows of the Great Depression awaited a tale of resilience, love, and a secret that would echo through time. Okay, a lot of these examples are dramatic, as I said, and that's probably not your thing. It's not my thing. But all you have to do is ask it to tone it down. You could say, please provide new suggestions, be less dramatic. You could tell it what kind of tone you're looking for, like academic, or maybe you want it to be written in poem stanzas. You could even ask it to use the style of a famous writer like Ernest Hemingway. I did a test with that yesterday. I took a story I had wrote already, put it into ChatGPT and said, please rewrite this in the form of Ernest Hemingway. And of course, within seconds it did. And it was pretty good. I mean, I wanted to change my story, but that's not what we're going to do. But it was a lot like Ernest Hemingway. So it can do whatever you ask it to do, is the lesson there. Here's how you may want to get started with imagining a conversation between your ancestors. For something like this, a good prompt might be, imagine a conversation between my great-grandparents who lived in Italy and were trying to decide if they should make the journey to America. And remember, you're having a conversation, so you start with a prompt. It will provide a response, and then you can and you should continue the conversation to get the most out of the experience. In this example, AI started with describing a scene and then went on to outline a whole conversation as if it was a script for a play. Now, the idea here is not to copy or use the provided suggestions verbatim. Instead, an exercise like this is meant to get your creativity flowing, get you thinking about the potential reasons your grandparents may have left their home country, the fears they might have had about doing so. Maybe it would even point you in a new direction in your research. The initial response I got from AI might be enough to get your story formulated, or you might think answers were generic and cliche. If that's the case, tell it so and provide some additional specific details to help it refine its answer. For example, you might want to tell it what specific year it was, what part of the country they were living in, what their occupations were, and you'll get much more refined responses. And I think this is a great way to put yourself in the position of an ancestor as you prepare to write a story. Insight mining is another good use for AI. It can help you analyze a series of documents collectively so that you can see if there are any themes or commonalities bubbling up. I have a collection of handwritten letters from a great-grand-aunt to her sister from about a 10-year period in the 1800s. In several of them, she mentions the death of her children. The references to the deaths of her children were intermixed with news of the crops and weather, but I did notice the repetitive use of the word lonesome. I asked AI to help me identify some insights from the series of letters as it relates to grief. For this, I offered this simple prompt. Provide an analysis of the grief expressed in the letters from Katie to her sister. And then, of course, I pasted the letters in. Now, one could argue that if I had sat with the letters for several hours, I may have been able to pull these insights myself. But AI was able to do so within seconds, and that gave me more time to reflect on the life of my ancestors and how I could bring that to life in a story. And it was a lot of times these insights are very introspective and maybe not things that I would have gotten to myself. They always open my eyes a little bit, and it's such a worthwhile activity. You can work with AI as you would with a writing coach or a teacher, and that's my favorite way to use it. This is because it helps me improve by showing me what's working and what areas of my writings need improvement, the way any good teacher would. A good prompt might be, I've written a script for a video that I'm going to make that illustrates how I use the genealogy proof standard of reasonably exhaustive research to find some information about an immigrant ancestor. What's working about the script and what areas could be improved? Remembering that we're having a conversation, I could go on. So I should say, of course, within seconds, it came back with, what some positive aspects of the story. And then I asked it to come back with some areas for improvement, and it listed them like this. And I saw them all. Some of them made sense and some of them didn't. And so I went on to ask it to clarify some of its suggestions by expanding on its thoughts. And I asked it to provide examples of areas of confusion. I could even have asked it to provide some specific language suggestions. In this example, it said that I needed to consider a more impactful conclusion to my video script, so I asked it for some suggestions. And what I love about the suggestions is that it categorized them thematically. Do I want to build anticipation? Maybe I do. Just like you would work with a real live writing professor, I would recommend that you evaluate the feedback that it gives you, update your writing, and then come back and have it reevaluate. Keep in mind that AI saves your conversations. So when you go back to have it re-review, go back to the original conversation and tell it that you have revised your story based on its feedback, and then paste your updated content and ask for a new review. I should also mention, I just heard this the other day. There is actually research that suggests being polite to AI will get you better responses than not being. I'm always polite because you never know if they're going to rise up. But but I can't believe that there's actually a study that says if you use please and thank you, you'll get better results. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, in all of these examples of using AI to help with your writing, you're going to get some specific language examples that you really like and that you may want to use in your narrative. And this is where you're going to want to exercise a little caution. Of course, you might know that once you create an original work, something as simple as taking a picture or writing a poem or even writing down your own memories, you are the author and the owner. You don't have to file paperwork or anything. You own the copyright. But if you asked AI to write a story for you, even if you put in all the details, all the genealogical facts about your ancestor and asked AI to write the story, who do you think is going to own that story? As of today, the lower courts have stated that AI-generated content cannot be copyrighted since there is no human author. So neither you nor AI would own the copyright. And that's okay if you don't care about copyrights. Maybe you don't, and that's fine. But you should care that your memories and stories are being told with your authentic voice. That's why I recommend AI for idea generation and writing evaluation. And then, even with the results I get, I do a lot of editing to make sure it's coming through in my voice. Don't use AI to write stories. Use AI to help you write stories. There's a lot we can use it for as it relates to genealogy, especially when it comes to writing stories. And technology is moving so fast that advancements are coming out right on top of each other. As an example, in February of last year, I uploaded this image of a handwritten letter and asked it to transcribe the letter. It flat out told me that it couldn't, saying that its capabilities weren't there yet for complex historical handwriting. Then, just a few months after that, I tried again and got a near perfect translation, which is amazing. The lesson here is to keep coming back and asking it over and over because it is learning so fast. There's another lesson we need to take heed of when it comes to relying on AI. And that lesson is to review the responses that you're getting from AI with a critical eye. I asked AI to transcribe this letter, even though I could easily read it. And it was way off. If you can't read the letter on the screen, it says, "This card was sent by your grandfather to my father, Mr. Louis S. Yassel." And it goes on with an address and says your grandfather was probably 18 years old. It's difficult to make out the postmark, etc., etc. AI said, the letter said, "Dear father, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to you today to let you know that I'm going to be moving to a new city," etc., etc. Okay, so obviously that's way off. But just think if the words in the original letter had been a little less legible to me. I might have been excited and accepted that as fact. As it is, though, I could clearly see that the transcription was wrong, so I decided to challenge it. And I said, "Did you make that up?" And it said, "Yes, I made that up," which is okay, good. Thank you for owning that. So always challenge AI. That's how it's going to learn and get to be better. Here's another example of AI making something up. Just as an experiment in capability, I asked AI to write a story using the details from those handwritten letters I referenced earlier. I asked AI to incorporate my great-grandaunt's actual words from the letters. This is the prompt that I used. And then within seconds, a short story appeared, which at first sounded great and true to the scenarios and the letters until I got to the words of Katie. They were not words that were conveyed in the letters. And I challenged AI on this fact, and it owned up. Again, the lesson is just make sure you're looking at what you're getting from AI with a critical eye and challenging when it's appropriate. And in that way, you're teaching AI, and that's a good thing. So the long and the short of it is this: you are doing the genealogy research. If you ask yourself why you're doing it, you'll most likely realize that it's because you want future generations to know where they came from. Sharing your discoveries in the form of a story is going to be much more memorable to your family of non-genealogists than a collection of facts. It's a little frightening to start writing, but if you make your goal to be simply write down the love story of so-and-so versus write an epic story about the complete lives of so-and-so, you'll be able to overcome those fears. Whether your stories are long or short, AI can help kickstart your writing by collaborating with you, and it can help you refine something that you've already written. And if that's too much or not enough, don't forget that there are probably real live people right there in the room among you who want to do the same thing, and together you can support each other's story writing efforts. Thank you.
Okay, see if there are any questions, Rod.
Yes, we can do, if anybody has questions, now is a great time for that.
I got the chat open too, so I put that in there too.
Okay. I'll go into showing just me.
Okay.
There we go.
And our camera too.
Let's see. How do I unshare my screen?
I think.
Just leave. Well, no. No, that won't work.
I think
I think I can unshare your screen. Let's see.
Share down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh,
there
okay.
should be a place where you can hit an arrow and maybe unshare it.
Doesn't do it.
Okay.
Huh?
Lower.
Stop sharing. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, you should have. There we. Any questions?
No questions?
Wow.
I just filled you with so much information. You don't need questions.
Got overloaded.
Does he have a question?
I have a question. I have lots of letters, and so does AI. Is it able to transcribe anything? Because some of them are. I found some really tiny letters from World War II from my uncle that were on the VE paper, and I had to take a magnifying glass. Would AI be able to expand that and still transcribe them?
It might be able to. I find the results with transcription of letters to kind of be hit and miss. So sometimes it can, and sometimes it doesn't even try. But more and more lately, it's trying and being quite successful. I would say give it a try. You can upload it as a PDF of the letter, or a JPEG, or a PNG file.
Is one better than the other?
No, I don't think so.
Can they translate it if it's in another language?
Good question.
That is a good question. No, not yet, as far as I know. Unfortunately, but you might be able to have it transcribe a handwritten letter that's in German, for example, and so it'll transcribe it to German, and then you maybe would be able to cut and paste that into like Google Translate and see what comes up.
Do you keep all the old letters after you've taken pictures and uploaded them?
Yeah, we are repositories for all of our ancestors' stuff, aren't we? Yes, I have a binder where I have everything protected and stored. And on the front of the binder, I have a big red stop sign for anybody that comes across it. Like, Do not throw this stuff away. These are original documents. They should be stored flat. They should be stored in a cool area, that sort of thing. So yes, I do keep those things.
I love the stop sign idea.
I have a question about making an audio recording. What's the best way to do that? Recording somebody using your iPhone, or do you recommend other equipment?
That's a great question. I'm going to let Gayle answer that. So let me put my mic on.
Yeah, so I've done some different recordings. The one of my parents was actually professionally done for a commercial, so that was nice. I got the benefit of that. But I've done a lot of recording with my grandkids, and in fact, on the Saving Story Saturday, Jerry and Marcia were showing us how to just use your iPhone with one of the round lights and a little stand to record people. And I've done that with a lot of family members, and my grandkids enjoyed doing it with me. So that's a great family activity because kids really love to use their phones to do things. And they turned out pretty well. And then I also use a program on my Mac to edit them. I use iMovie to kind of make it look better when I'm done. That way I can kind of, adjust the views and things like that. But I think an iPhone or any phone that can do the recording is a great way to go because it's handy. So I would encourage that.
And I have one question. The ChatGPT or Google Gemini, is there obvious advantages or disadvantages to one or the other?
Did you hear the question, Chris?
That's a good question. And there are things that one is better for than the other. I use ChatGPT for almost everything. And then sometimes I move over to Gemini just to see how different it is. ChatGPT is going to be very dramatic. In some of the examples that I shared, you saw that with the language that it brings forward. But I wish I had a better, a stronger answer for you to help you in that regard. I only use the free versions of all of these things, and I feel like I get pretty darn good results no matter what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hold on. Switch microphone. Kirsi, oops, I think we're in the same room. So it's, what I would say is I just watched a webinar on AI, and people have definite, I like Kirsi, I use ChatGPT a lot because it's convenient, it's easy, you know how to work it. I tried Gemini a little bit. I didn't see a big difference, but there was another gal on there who really liked Claude. I think as long as it's free, you should try as many as you want to and see what's going to give you the best result. The prompts, they really emphasize the prompts as being really important. And there's a way you can actually save your prompts, which is handy. So if you're doing a lot of story writing like we do, you can save them and use them over and over again and be polite, like Kirsi said, and you're going to be able to use the same one every time. But I would try different AI engines and just see what you get. If you really like one, you can pay for it. And sometimes they have a little bit more functionality when you pay. And in terms of translation, I think that's coming up. I think it's going to be coming very soon. So I would just encourage people to listen to AI webinars or different things like that. And you're going to learn a lot more about how to use that tool.
Perplexity cites the sources.
Oh yeah, Perplexity actually does source citation, which for us again is awesome. And particularly if it's going to make up a story, it's good to know if there is actually a source. Yeah, because Kirsi and I have both had it kind of use its imagination and make a real exciting story that was completely not true. So you do need to really check that out. But the source citation is helpful because at least it looked somewhere and you can see where it looked to find the info.
Anybody else?
What was that one called? Perplexity? Or what? Huh? That's the name of it?
What was the name of the program that did source citation?
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to your group to speak and for being great listeners. And thank you so much.
Very welcome. We had a question. What was the name of the program that did source citations?
That was Perplexity.
Thank you. Very, very good program. Thank you, Kirsi, for doing that for us.
Thank you. Thank you too, Eric, for getting my name right. I appreciate that. I don't know if Gayle gave you like really long lessons or whatever, but I appreciate that you got my name right.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I try to. Don't always make it, but try to.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
you guys have fun down there in hot Arizona.
We get some sunshine
Yeah, we
today.
do today. Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Let's see. Record.